I grew up just about 5 miles away from here. Born and raised on a fifth-generation family farm, and about 13 years ago it was, I graduated from high school, and probably like most other people my age, I couldn't wait to leave. So that's what I did. I studied undergraduate in St. Peter, Minnesota, and after that headed out west to Boulder, Colorado, where I focused on my studies. I got a master's in geography and with immigrant and refugee populations, and I was really looking for ways that I could become involved in the nonprofit sector and helping new Americans get to the U.S., resettle and adjust culturally and get on their own 2 feet financially. And at that time, which was 2003, that's when Justin entered the picture.
We stayed on in Boulder about another 2 years after graduating, and following that we took about a year off and then decided that we'd like to move to West Africa and work with the Peace Corps. And so that was something that we did. We applied to the Peace Corps and we were accepted, and we
so that was in January 2008, after having lived a bit of the suburban life outside of Denver, Justin doing carpentry and myself working in the nonprofit world, decided we wanted to see some more and headed to West Africa.
Yeah, just did a lot of culture sharing as well. That's one of the big goals of Peace Corps is culture sharing. Sharing our culture with the local people, and then sharing the culture of the local people with our friends and family back here in the States.
Yeah, and that brought us to the end of 2009 when we moved back to the States right at the end of that year. Arrived home in time for Christmas and basically looked at each other and said, now what?
So what's the genesis of the wooden toy end of this business?
Yeah, well, in October 4th of 2010, our daughter was born, and we had been here for a few months. We had been here for about 5 or 6 months at that point, and at that point we were still really trying to figure out what it was that we were going to do to make ends meet. And when she was born, we received quite a few gifts from a lot of our family and extended family and friends, and it just kind of came to us. We thought maybe that would be a good idea for a business for ourselves. Considering my woodworking background and passion in carpentry, and Kathy had a business background in marketing, and so we figured we could sort of put 2 and 2 together and try to make it work, selling wooden toys. And so that's how Smiling Tree Toys was born.
I guess I've taken on most of that, and the marketing, advertising and sales part of that, and Justin and I both are involved with getting the oil to the press and bottling it and having that finished product ready to go. So in a lot of ways we're both giving about 100% times 2.
The challenges of doing a business, from the country, on an online business, and marketing a new product, and what's it like? Just with the availability of the internet and all of the e-communications and everything in general, I don't feel very handicapped in terms of our physical location with our business. It definitely has its disadvantages at times because we aren't located near a metro area where there's large metropolitan population, and so whether it's going to sample at co-ops or trying to get our product to a distributor, or going to, we don't have huge farmers markets that we can access nearby. We have to drive 150 miles to get to that large population base. So in that way, in terms of the oil, that's difficult. When you're looking at it from the aspect of the wooden toys, our target market and our primary customer is not
located near us either, I guess. So again, it's the larger population bases, and I suppose people with a bit more disposable income as well, in more urban areas are also those customers looking and finding our toys. But with the internet here, that's really what allows us to live here and be doing what we're doing, of course. And with, quite in terms of logistics, the national shipping carriers service us, obviously. And so those kinds of things are just fabulous because we're able to still have this lifestyle that we've always idealized, and live certainly at a lower cost of living relative to urban areas, which has been helpful as small business owners who are starting up and trying to, earn enough money to live off of.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, in a lot of ways for us, it's really the best of both worlds. We don't necessarily feel isolated, just because our businesses are able to take advantage of most opportunities that a business in an urban area can, for the most part, but we're also able to have that lifestyle that we want.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of options, I think, in terms of partnerships, working with different suppliers or vendors that are around here that you might not know of, when you first settle to a rural area like this. So certainly taking advantage of those opportunities, but at the same time, realistically, you need to, get your feelers out, and you are going to have to be partnering and working with people who are hundreds of miles or several states away or other countries. So I think there's a challenge, but also a great opportunity for rural, your close local connections and partnerships, but also at the same time reaching out and, taking what it is you need from kind of outside regions as well.
And then just the physical space. I mean, as far as what we do in our toy business, just having enough space to be able to do it, just physical space, is something that is much harder to come by living in an urban or suburban area. And so that's something that we literally would not be able to do if we lived in an urban area, just because we wouldn't be able to afford the space. And then of course we would, considering the higher cost of living, we probably wouldn't be able to make ends meet doing what we're now doing if we were living in an urban area. Whereas here we are able to make it work because it's a lower cost of living, and we have the resources locally to be able to do it, and we have the infrastructure. And so I think just speaking of opportunity and adding on to what Kathy said, I think there really is a lot of opportunity in a rural area for people to start small businesses, because you have a chance to give yourself a bit more flexibility financially, because you're not spending as much money on your cost of living, and so you can put that money towards starting a business, and I think that's something that really inhibits people, at least as far as the startup goes, is they don't necessarily have the time and the money to do it. And so I think moving to a rural area really frees up both of those things really, really well.
Kind of in passing, the things you learned about your neighbors coming back, the things you discovered were all around you that you hadn't paid attention to growing up. Can I hear a little more about that? It's kind of an exciting area.
I think so, and that may be true of just in the last generation as well, of other people like ourselves who are looking to do things like this. But one of the things that felt like a sign to us as we started our wooden toy business and moved out here was, by some chance, Justin made a phone call, and through maybe a couple degrees of separation, we realized there was a man living here about 6 miles away from us who has a sawmill. And
out in the prairie.
Right out in the prairie, which
you would never think.
Justin's first, I think, words out of his mouth is, "What's he doing in the middle of the prairie with the sawmill?"
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
So for example, we can get some of our local black walnut wood. He's harvesting, oftentimes just salvaging from maybe farm sites that are being bulldozed under, or other trees that have fallen, and we're able to take that wood straight from him and use locally produced wood, which is wonderful.
And then we just kind of took that as a sign, because it was really serendipitous, and we kind of took that as a sign, and we said, you know, maybe this is something we should be doing.
Yeah. And, you know, the other young couples we're finding who are our age, who have also done urban living, that seems to kind of be if you haven't grown up here your entire life, it's not common, it seems, to find a couple our age who, one of whom maybe has grown up here but left for a while, came back with a spouse, kind of got maybe a little disillusioned with the urban or suburban life that they had had. So there's other couples doing CSA, as a community supported agriculture, and, you know, vegetable market gardening, or
there's alpacas over here. There's a family with a small herd of alpacas. So it's sort of an alternative livestock operation. Yeah. One of our substitute mail carriers, they have a herd of goats, and they do goat's cheese. You know, so there's a lot of opportunity as far as that goes.
There's an abandoned little, quite old bakery cafe in Lamberton near us that just was purchased the other day. A young couple, the woman of whom grew up here is a few years younger than myself, is moving back to open it and start their own little cafe. So it's trickling down, you know, and every time we hear of these stories, we actually came upon a local vineyard and winery 2 weekends ago when we were out on a drive. And every little one of those things just gets us a little more excited and really confident, I think, in the movement that is kind of making its way. I think the rural revival, if you will, in terms of some kind of alternative lifestyles outside of commodity farming.
So, I can't resist asking, what counts as out of the norm? I mean, what kinds of wild and crazy things do you guys do here?
I knew I'd get in trouble if I started down this path. Maybe they're not that crazy, but maybe just in terms of
just not conforming to social expectations.
Our interests.
I guess.
I mean, we kind of joke actually that we have a number of African masks and jewelry on our walls here, and so we kind of joke to say we're probably the only one in this county and several counties around that have African decor on our walls, or we're maybe listening to some reggae music out in the wood shop.
Yeah.
Or,
yeah, I mean, I think that we've been lucky enough to be able to, I guess, somewhat have the freedom of choice to pursue what we're really passionate about and what we really enjoy doing. And so I think in that way, that's what we do that sort of puts us outside of the box or outside of the norm, because most people don't necessarily have the freedom of choice to do what they want to do. They do what they have to do to pay the bills, and that does not necessarily mean that they enjoy what they do. And so I think that in that way we do stuff out of the box or out of the norm, because we're doing something we really enjoy, and it's a lot of 60-hour weeks, and it's a huge challenge, but at the end of the day it's totally worth it. I mean, we wouldn't have it any other way.
And we drive a Subaru, which is also out of the norm.
You mentioned the 5-generation farm and the whole business of carrying on a heritage or carrying on a legacy. And I'm curious what the content of that is for you. I mean, in what way you see yourself kind of passing on a real legacy to your daughter?
Sure. I think in its simplest sense, that's physically being, at our family's roots, where it all began. So I am 5th generation, my father being the 4th, and physically being here on the land, on that farm site where it all began, is, in the simplest way, just having Amana grow up to know that, to know that area, to know the land herself, and to know how we're living off of it. Picking apples and pressing, using an old wooden press to make apple juice, or raising hens, egg-laying hens and having chickens and picking eggs every day. Composting and planting native berries.
Tapping our maple trees.
Tapping maple trees and doing our own maple syrup run every springtime. Those are all the kinds of things that, even when I was growing up, were probably quite unique to my family, to what we were doing. And I didn't necessarily know that at the time. And now it's perhaps even more unique, you know, in our daughter's generation, to still be seeing those things through. And to know, to understand that a pickle comes from a cucumber that you pick in the garden, and to know where that gallon of milk is coming from, and, you know, how the egg got in that carton. Those are all things that I don't want her to not know when she's growing up. What she does with it, of course, is up to her when she's older, but I want her to know those things that my family has always known.